Hi, this is Dr. Victoria Nalule, and um, an expert in energy and mining. And today I want to talk about climate finance and carbon credits. So, when we're talking about climate change, we understand that one of the ways to address climate change is through climate change mitigation. But however, we also have to ensure that different people are able to adapt to the various impacts of climate change. So, with climate change adaptation and mitigation, we need finances. So, the discussion about climate change cannot be effective without really finding ways of raising the finances that are needed to ensure that we adapt to climate change, and also for the countries who are emitting heavily to also be able to reduce on their emissions. So all that requires money. It requires finances. That's why climate finance or green financing is very important, especially if we're to ensure that we effectively address climate change. So I'm going to share my slides. So that brings us to the discussion about green financing and carbon credits. But the main focus here basically is on green financing, what it entails, why is it important in this climate change era, and then also what are the challenges of different countries when it comes to green financing, and who should bear the burden of ensuring that these finances are available. So the subject of green financing or even climate change finance, it's a broad subject because it encompasses all the different aspects of ways on which we can address climate change, adaptation, mitigation, by looking at the necessary finances and investments that are needed to ensure that we're able to address climate change. So the focus today will be on green financing, and then we shall also briefly talk about carbon credits and also talk about climate assets. So green financing basically refers to financial investments flowing into sustainable development projects and initiatives, environmental products, and policies that encourage the development of a more sustainable economy. So with the need to address climate change and ensure sustainability, we need to first have access to the finances that will enable us to achieve a sustainable development. So green financing, it's a wider concept which looks at the necessary finances and investments that are needed for the required infrastructure that will ensure us that we actually uh, embrace sustainability, and then the required policies and laws. Because remember, even when a country is passing its laws or policies, they need money to finance the experts who are going to enact these policies, who are going to do research to see what kind of policies are going to be effective or not. So, from the policy development, law and legal development, infrastructure development, and also technology and innovation, all those are very key for for the green economy, and yet they are also dependent on the availability of finances. So green financing, basically, it's a wide concept that looks into the finances and investments that are needed for us to be able to achieve a greener economy, or even to ensure that we achieve sustainability in each and everything that we do. So what does green financing entail? It entails climate finance, and it also entails mitigation and adaptation finance. It entails other environmental objectives. So anything that is related to the protection of the environment would also be falling under green financing. And this could include industrial pollution control, water sanitation, or by biodiversity protection, and many other aspects or things that haven't been mentioned here, as long as it's a project or initiative that is intended to protect the environment, to ensure sustainability, to ensure that we're addressing climate change. All those will fall under green financing, especially if they require investments for them to be able to move forward. And most of them would require massive investments and finances. So green finance basically comprises of the financing of public and private green investments, including preparatory and capital costs in the following areas: environmental goods and services such as water management or protection of biodiversity and landscapes, prevention, minimization, and compensation of damages to the environment and to the climate, such as energy efficiency or dams. So all these are examples of green financing. It also involves the financing of public policies, including operation costs, that encourage the implementation of environmental damage mitigation or adaptation projects and initiatives. For instance, feed-in tariffs for renewable energies, because remember, renewable energy is very key in addressing climate change because it's replacing, or it's meant to replace, fossil fuels. And fossil fuels like oil, gas, coal are said to be the main contributor of the greenhouse gas emission, as as they're responsible to over 60% of the greenhouse gas emissions. So for you to have access to renewable energy, you definitely need the finances, and also the finances that are going to ensure the development of renewable energy policies or even enaction of climate change laws and policies. All those will fall under green financing. So it's a wider concept really that looks into any aspect that's aimed at ensure sustainable development. It also comprises of components of the financial system that deal specifically with green investments, such as the Green Climate Fund or financial instruments for green investments, for instance, green bonds and structured green funds, including their specific legal, economic, and institutional framework conditions. So any other initiative that's focused on green climate fund or even financial instruments for green investments, all those would fall under green financing, especially if you need to establish them, to maintain them, and also to develop the institution framework to ensure that these initiatives or instruments are effective. The institution framework will basically require massive finances for you to be able to pay the people who are going to be involved in those initiatives, to train them, to ensure capacity building, to have the necessary laws, and also to ensure that actually everything works out as it's supposed to be, in order to ensure that the initiatives that have been established for the greener economy are effective. So all those would still require money and finances, and hence they fall under green financing. So one aspect that falls under green financing is the example of climate finance. And climate finance basically looks at the finances needed for adaptation and mitigation. And climate finance is just one aspect or component of green finance, implying that green finance is a larger aspect or a larger concept, but underneath it, the various other concepts or initiatives you can look at, and one of them is climate finance. So, in summary, green finance comprises of financing of green investments, financing of public green policies, financing of financial systems, and green investments include any investments in climate change adaptation. Still, investments in climate change adaptation would fall under climate finance because it's also a component of green finance. Then green investments would also include renewable energies, investments in renewable energy, because we know renewable energies are very key in addressing climate change as they replace the dirty fuels. And then energy efficiency, investments in energy efficiency would still fall under green investments. And then other climate change mitigation, for instance, reforestation, or even investing in technologies to address climate change, like the carbon credit, carbon capture and credit, carbon capture. It's also an example. Then industrial pollution control, any initiative aimed at ensuring that we reduce industrial pollution, it would still fall under green financing or green investments. Water sanitation would also fall under green investments. Biodiversity protection would fall under green investment, and waste processing and recycling. So we're going to look at carbon credits, still under the component of green investments. And carbon credits are basically a permit that represents 1 ton of carbon dioxide removed from the atmosphere. So a carbon credit is a permit, and that permit, it's representing 1 ton of carbon dioxide removed from the atmosphere. So they are measurable. They are verifiable emission reductions from certified climate action projects. These projects include reduce, remove, or avoid greenhouse gas emissions. So the project, for a person to qualify to issue out carbon credits, the project has to be certified. And then one of the things that the projects are supposed to be doing is to reduce, remove, or avoid greenhouse gas emissions. So not anyone can just wake up and decide that they're going to give out carbon credits. They have to ensure that they are certified, and also they have to ensure that their activities or projects reduce on the greenhouse gas emission. A quality carbon credit means 1 ton of carbon dioxide has been reduced or removed from the atmosphere. Further, this reduction or removal has been certified under an internationally recognized carbon dioxide. So if you have 2 carbon credits, that means that 2 tons of carbon dioxide have been removed from the atmosphere. If you have 3 carbon credits, it means that 3 tons of carbon dioxide have been removed from the atmosphere. So companies and individuals can account for their unavoidable emissions by buying carbon credits from certified activities that support community development, protect the ecosystems, or install efficient technology to reduce or remove emissions from the atmosphere. So there are companies that are unable to reduce on their emissions. And for them to justify or even to try to be compliant with the net zero goals, they would opt to buy carbon credits from certified activities that actually are involved in reducing the emissions. But then the question arises, how effective are the carbon credits? Because on one part, you have people who are reducing emissions, and then on the other part, you have companies or individuals who keep emitting, but their reasoning is they cannot stop emitting, or their activities cannot reduce on the emissions. So to compensate for their own emissions, they buy credits from another company or project that is involved in reducing emissions. So the question is it really effective? Are we reducing any emissions by giving out carbon credits? Or are we just enabling companies to keep emitting while hiding under the carbon credit initiatives? Because you have someone who's reducing emissions, okay, 1 ton, then you have someone who's continuously emitting. But then for you to compensate for that, you're like, okay, you can buy carbon credits from this person who's reducing emissions. So what exactly is changing? So carbon credits are good, but we also have to be realistic and practical and ask ourselves, how effective are they? Are they just measures to to allow big companies to keep emitting because they can afford to buy carbon credits? Or is it just a business opportunity for some projects that are involved in reducing carbon emissions? So all that has to be asked, and we have to be honest and find genuine answers on whether carbon credits are effective or it's just a business opportunity to for people who are involved in those low emission projects, and then for the companies that keep emitting, it's just an excuse for them to proceed with their emissions without feeling so guilty. But anyway, that's something you have to look into in your free time. So, who can purchase carbon credits? They can be purchased by an individual or, more commonly, a company to make up for carbon dioxide emissions that come from industrial production, delivery vehicles, or even travel. So, any person or even a company that's involved in projects that emit extensively, they can buy carbon credits. And so in the UK, we have the Woodland Carbon Guarantee, which provides you with the option to sell your captured carbon in the form of verified carbon credits called Woodland Carbon Units to the government for a guaranteed price every 5 or 10 years up to 2025 or 56. This provides an additional long-term income from your woodland. So in different countries have different ways they deal with carbon credits. And in the UK, they have the Woodland Carbon Guarantee. And through there, you can look out for how you can sell your carbon credits or how you can actually buy carbon credits. Now, moving on, we also have the UK Emission Trading Scheme. And basically, with emission trading schemes, a regulator defines an upper limit, that is a cap of greenhouse gas emissions that may be emitted in clearly defined sectors of an economy. And then emission permits or allowances are given out or sold to the entities that are included in the emission trading scheme. So for the sake of the UK, or giving an example of the UK, the UK emission trading scheme is a cap and trade system which caps the total level of greenhouse gas emissions, creating a carbon market with a carbon price signal to incentivize decarbonization. So they set a limit, or they set a cap of how much you could emit, and then when you exceed that, then you can be able to uh, buy carbon credits. And then for larger businesses, so how do companies benefit? For larger businesses and utility companies in particular, carbon credits can be earned by reducing the operations carbon footprint. These credits can then be sold or traded to other companies for a profit. So if there are companies that are involved in projects that reduce emissions, then they can be able to earn carbon credits, and then they can sell them to other companies for a profit. So this is basically a brief discussion about green financing, carbon credits, emission trading schemes. But obviously, in your free time, look out to see how effective are these initiatives. Is it a way of making money? Is it a way of addressing climate change? Or is it just a way to excuse the big companies that continuously emit, but they can hide under carbon credits to justify their actions? I don't know. It's really up to you to find out what you think, giving you looking at some examples from your own countries. So also under the green financing, we can look at climate assets and climate asset management, investments in land-based assets in developed markets to preserve and restore natural capital, including sustainable agriculture and sustainable forestry. So with climate assets, basically you look at any investments that are made in a project that, and which project is really intended to reduce on the greenhouse gas emissions or even address climate change. So all those projects or investments would fall under uh, climate assets. So basically that's it when it comes to this class on green financing. But one thing that stands out is to look at how effective these green financing are, how effective are the different initiatives, including like the carbon credits, the climate asset management, and any other initiative aimed at reducing the greenhouse gas emission. How effective are they, and how can we ensure that in the long run, every initiative we're coming up with is intended to address climate change and not merely intended to benefit a few people who are involved in the business of climate assets or even carbon credits. So that marks the end of this session. Thank you very much.